Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Orange Nerd Show. I brought my two good friends on the channel, Mr. Disney Family Man 23 and Vash Sky. Disney Family Man, welcome aboard, sir.
Thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure to have these nice chats with y'all.
Perfect. And Mr. Family Man, if you could tell everybody at home where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. You could find me on my YouTube channel. No, I always screw it up. There, Disney Family Man 23. You could also find me on Instagram and Twitter at Disney George. And I'm also part of the Grand Circle Tour podcast you could listen to on iTunes and Stitcher.
Perfect. Mr. Vash Sky, how you doing, brother?
Doing very well. Happy to be here. You can find me at Vash Sky on Twitter. It's right there. And Freshly Squeezed on your channel. Freshly Squeezed, your source for fresh, juicy content, squeezed fresh right from the grove. So that's where I'm at.
Perfect. All right, fellas, let's dive right into today's topics. And the first topic today is going to be this huge, massive news that Discovery is going to be buying WarnerMedia for, I believe, like $43 billion. Vash Guy, what are your overall thoughts on this incredible, really surprising news?
This was incredibly surprising. I didn't really expect this one coming. I had heard that MGM wasn't doing very well, but had no idea that WarnerMedia would be let go essentially by AT&T, and Discovery would have this joint deal and create this kind of, this kind of all new media company or entity. Did not expect this one. This one's a very interesting one.
Yeah, it was very interesting, and it threw me for a complete and total loop. I do think the deal from Discovery, well, really from both sides, WarnerMedia and Discovery, I think it's kind of a brilliant deal. It's brilliant for Discovery because it instantly elevates Discovery to a major player in Hollywood. I mean, they were always pretty big, but this is a whole new level. I mean, now they're competing with Netflix, Disney. This is, Comcast. This is a huge deal for them. But it also helps WarnerMedia because I think WarnerMedia has been kind of passed around over the last, 20 plus years. Mm-hmm. Between like the Time Warner and the AOL merger in the early 2000s, it's good that, Warner now has a home where they focus on just Hollywood and content. They're not owned by a telecom company. They're not owned by an online, whatever company anymore. It's more in their wheelhouse, so to speak. So I think it's really going to help WarnerMedia. Mr. Family Man, what are your thoughts on this huge merger between Discovery and WarnerMedia that was announced a few days ago?
I do agree with you. I am glad that WarnerMedia does have a permanent home, in a steady platform. I'm just really surprised that it was Discovery. Out of all the things, I thought for sure Universal was going to take a jab at that, because I think that would have been a more harmonious connection between the two, because I think, with the background of WarnerMedia and also the background of Universal, I think that would have been a nice sort of a nice blended marriage, so to speak, between the two companies. It kind of just threw me off of thinking Discovery, but at the same time, if you look on the screen, you have Netflix, you have Prime Video, you have Disney Plus, HBO Max. These are all big time, hard-hitting competitors, and Discovery wants a piece of that, because after Disney had purchased Fox, there's only so many entities that could be purchased throughout these companies, and I think Discovery jumped at the chance of it. And I think that's probably why they paid out such a big cost.
Well, and you know what, George, you brought up a great point. I think, and I made a video on this the other day, I think Comcast Universal really missed the boat here. They lost Fox, which is fine. I mean, that ended up being a very contentious kind of thing, and they lost out to that. Fine. But then they missed the boat on WarnerMedia. Okay. Another big acquisition they could have brought into their company. I mean, Universal, they have some good properties in-house. They have the DreamWorks animation. They have the Minions. They have Fast and Furious, Jurassic World. But in this new landscape, they definitely need to do more, in my opinion. And I think that missing the boat with WarnerMedia, the Warner Brothers studio library, between the Looney Tunes, the DC characters, the Harry Potter film library, could have fed the parks, the Universal parks, for decades. And they completely dropped that ball. What are your thoughts, Vash, on that? Like, do you think that like Comcast should have been aggressive in getting WarnerMedia? I mean, this would have been a huge boon for them, I think, for their parks and everything.
I think it would have. I think it would have been a huge boon, and it's a far more natural fit, in my opinion. You know, the kind of cohesion that Universal and Time Warner would have shared. You know, the Comcast distribution platform. I mean, it just seemed like, wow, that could have been a really great move. But I think what they were, I think if you look at the terms of the deal, AT&T still has like a 71% ownership stake in this kind of new formation of what this company will look like after the Discovery and Time Warner merge, and so they'll still have an ownership stake. It's kind of complicated. I mean, they had only bought Time Warner for like $85 billion only like a couple of years ago, and so you know, valuation, they're valuing it at like 30% more than they actually purchased it for. I think with those licensing agreements, with that kind of split ownership, I think it was just a little bit too messy for Comcast, and I think that they would want to absorb an entity like Time Warner, either outright or at least have an ownership stake. And I think that was just a little bit too rich for their blood. You know, it's interesting if you look at the history of Islands of Adventure. Back in the 90s, Universal had an idea of incorporating not the Marvel superhero island that it eventually became, but actually using DC properties. I think they would love to get their hands on the full acquisition rights of Harry Potter, but you know, it's just, this is kind of corporate consolidation. This is how it's going to go, and you better snatch these up, or else you're going to lose your shot.
Right. Exactly.
And that's actually I was going to mention too, is with Universal, I would have thought for sure they would have, you know, fought Discovery on it, because even with, as you mentioned, with Marvel and even with The Simpsons, you know, it's not really even Universal property, because they're also having to contend with Disney on those properties of what could be used, what could not be used. And as of right now, Disney has the higher stake of having Marvel, because Universal can't even add anything more into the Marvel superhero island. Whatever they have is what stays. So even though of how much it could become dated, their hands are tied.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, I'm just really surprised by that. I think eventually, you know, I think Comcast Universal will eventually pick up a studio, but there comes a point though when you miss so many opportunities that you're left with kind of the scraps, you know, so to speak. I think Warner would have been a great benefit to Universal. I think now the only thing really left, it would be Viacom, CBS, which they have some decent properties, but again, it's not WarnerMedia. It's not even Fox, you know.
Well, if anything goes, they could always take the reboot of the Flintstones.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, geez. Oh, yeah. Man.
That's hitting rock bottom, though, right? Yeah. Rock bottom.
Yeah. Oh, here we go with the puns again. Oh boy. No, I think George makes a good point. I mean, this is what's going to happen, folks. We're going to see some corporate consolidations. You know, as you see on the screen right now, you know, there's some really, really big players, and you know, right now we have between all of those, like 7 or 8 or something like that. Even then, they're under, you know, brands of other things, you know, ESPN Plus and Hulu can be packaged with Disney Plus and so forth. There's only going to be like 3 or 4 left at the end of the day, and if you want to be one of the big players, you're going to have not only content coming out, but a library or a catalog.
Well, and you know, Vash, yeah, exactly. You got to stake your place, cement your position now. And a lot of park fans disagree with me on this, but I mean, there's a lot of talk about, Universal, they're doing the Velocicoaster. Disney has to respond to the Velocicoaster and things like that. And I think that stuff is so unimportant right now. And I'm a park person first. That's my passion, you know. But I realize that like this streaming thing, this change in the industry is far more important right now to get these ducks lined up in a row than it is for Disney to sort of try to respond to every little attraction that Universal makes. And I think that their focus on streaming is the right move. I think Comcast really needs to jump on that boat, because if you look at like social media and just buzz in general, nobody is talking about Peacock. I mean, it's all Disney Plus, Netflix, and HBO Max. It is. I mean, I can't tell you. I mean, Peacock had a little bit of buzz, I guess, with Saved by the Bell for like, 10 and a half minutes maybe, but that was it, and I think that's detrimental to the studio long term. I really, really do. They need to jump on this.
And I think that's where Chapek is looking at it too, because he's constantly pushing, the streaming platform as the front runner over the parks right now. And I think that's probably why he's pushing this more rather than focus on the parks.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And, Disney has enough in the park, like in the park realm coming up in the next like year and a half, 2 years to keep it going while they focus on Disney Plus. I mean, you have the Avengers Campus opening soon at Disneyland. You have Mickey Minnie Runaway Railway opening in a couple years at Disneyland. You got a ton of stuff at Walt Disney World. The 18 months 50 celebration, Tron, Ratatouille, Cosmic Rewind. You have this whole thing with the what's it called? The Disney Cruise. The new ship. That George did a video on. A fantastic video, by the way. Check it out if you can. On the Disney Wish, that's rolling out soon. They have the Galactic Star Cruiser. There's enough going on with the parks to feed that for a while they focus on Disney Plus, and they absolutely should focus on it. This is the priority. It's a survival moment right now in Hollywood. You either get in or you're done.
Yeah, I mean, and let's be fair here. The parks, we're losing all kinds of money. So really, when it came to the parks, it was really about containing costs and stopping the hemorrhaging, stopping the bleeding. And so, as we come out, with Disneyland Paris and Disneyland being operational once again, we might see more investment come to those areas. I mean, I think it was Walt Disney World News Today who found out that, yeah, they were moving stuff in the Tron building and stuff like that. Like capital expenditures were rising, but honestly, like you said, I mean, it really is Disney Plus. That is the most crucial concern. They can catch up with parks pretty easily, but you can't make up lost ground in the subscriber realm quite as easily. It's interesting. You mentioned Peacock. As competitive as Comcast has historically been, and Universal, especially if you look on Twitter, it's quite funny. It's quite hilarious, quite interesting. This was the one that they probably should have beaten Disney Plus to the punch for, or Disney to the punch for in terms of Disney Plus and its launch date, because if it was just a little bit earlier, I think it would have really taken off during the pandemic. But it kind of, it just, there was no room for stuff like that, post shutdown. So that's kind of what happened.
Yeah, and when you have so many, like you're looking at the screenshot right here, so many different platforms people can choose from. Yeah. Disney Plus, Netflix, Amazon, Apple TV, all this stuff. People are only going to really do maybe one or two of these. So, if you're not going to provide something that people really, really need, you're going to get left behind. Like, I already have a Netflix. I have a Disney Plus, if I want to add one more, it'll probably be HBO Max. Why would I add something else? Like, why would I add something like Peacock? Although I think, to be fair, Peacock, is that subscription free, or
it's free? It's
free. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, it's like ad revenue or okay.
Yeah, they do have a lot of ads and commercials. So it basically takes the free portion of it to the notion of saying, okay, well, you can have it free, but you're going to be watching a lot of ads in between your movie or show that you're watching.
So it's kind of like television, basically, on your
basically,
iPad.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's just really a new distribution platform. But as far as revenue stream, I mean, maybe they're getting ad revenue.
Now, as of right now, I have 4 that are on here. I have the Disney Plus, Netflix, HBO Max, and Hulu. Now, the reason why I have Hulu separated from Disney Plus is because I purchased that special at the D23 Expo. Right. And then with Verizon, I also get a free year of Disney Plus. So I essentially don't have to pay for Disney Plus until 2024.
Wow. That's not bad. That's not a bad deal at all.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, then I'll probably bundle it with the Disney Plus and Hulu.
You know, it's interesting. I was looking up research for this topic, and they said that the Verizon deal, I think only 19% of the people who got Disney Plus free with that service are inclined not to resubscribe, or actually, pay to subscribe officially after their trial period's over. So that's high. I mean, that's Disney Plus has got a product that people want and people want to stick with. So that's good news for them.
Well, just wait till the third season of Mandalorian, and that's going to be a beast because they're getting a lot of pent up demand for that now. Because season 1 and season 2 they were pretty quick, concession wise. It was like season 1 ended, you wait a little bit, season 2, but there's going to be a bigger gap now between 2 and 3. It's going to be huge. I mean, Mando season 3 is going to be fucking huge, I think, assuming Baby Yoda is still in the show. Hopefully we'll see,
Hey, that is an interesting question, but that's okay, though. I can't wait to see my absolute favorite character, Gina Carano. That's going to be really, really fun.
Sorry, folks, too soon?
Might be a little bit too soon. I think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be good. They have a slew of content, which we'll get into. But this is interesting. This is how it's panning out, folks. They're consolidating. They're getting together here, and there's only going to be a couple left. Who's it going to be?
Yeah, exactly. And I can't believe this. The CEO of Discovery was his name, David Zaslav. What a power move, man. I mean, this guy went from running a fairly small media. I mean, I say small in relative terms. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Fairly small media company in Discovery and becoming one of the top players. I mean, now he's rubbing shoulders with Iger, Chapek, Brian Roberts. It's overnight, essentially. He's become a huge player overnight. It's wild, absolutely wild.
And I think that's probably why it benefited Discovery, because no one knew what they were capable of doing. If someone were to say to me, "Oh, Discovery is going to purchase WarnerMedia," I'd be like, "Yeah, okay." I would have actually put more of my money on Universal. So it's like coming out of the night, they just kind of made that purchase and say, "You know what? We're kind of do this under the table sort of thing that no one would expect," and then boom, no one can fight us on it.
Yeah. It's pretty wild, you guys. It's pretty wild. We'll see how it all shakes out. I mean, this is the streaming wars are serious. This is the biggest seismic shift to happen in Hollywood in my lifetime. This reminds me a lot of what happened to the music industry when Napster and all those kind of streaming music download whatever sites were coming up in the early 2000s, and how much that changed the music landscape. Now it's happening to Hollywood. And far later than I expected, to be honest with you.
That would be a very good special, like a 10-part documentary titled Streaming Wars.
Right.
But here's the big problem. Which streaming service would it be on?
Right. Yeah.
That's funny. Maybe the biggest one that's left. I don't know. It's quite interesting. With that whole aspect, you had a lot of independent creators and independent content producers come out and either launch their own platforms or do deals with iTunes or so forth. This is very interesting because you have these just big media conglomerates, these huge companies just getting just eating each other, and there's only going to be, like I keep saying, there's only going to be a couple left at the end of the day. This is mind blowing. We'll see how far this actually goes. It's also going to be interesting to see what happens to leadership at WarnerMedia. They had been, there had been some talk and discussion about moves being made in that area. Are those jobs safe? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I heard, I forgot the gentleman's name, but the guy who runs, not the CEO of WarnerMedia, but I guess the guy who runs Warner Brothers. Yes. They're saying he's on his way out. Do you remember his name, Vash, by any chance?
I don't know.
I don't remember.
Look, it takes everything in my power just to keep up with Disney and all of its branches and divisions and leadership and all that kind of stuff. I have very little memory for those kind of things. I do apologize.
No, I'm the same way. I don't remember his name. Real quick, I can probably get it. Yeah, okay. I was just reading about him.
Yeah, they had changes of leadership a little bit, simply because of how they were handling the DC universe, or the DC extended universe, and some of the maybe wins and missteps along the way, and so this is going to be very, very interesting. You got it?
His name is Jason Kilar, and I heard he is on his way out. I was watching John Campea actually the other day, and it's looking like Jason. Yeah, his name is Jason Kilar. He's on his way out. Absolutely. And the interesting thing enough, on Campea's show, it was him and Robert Burnett. Okay, and they were talking about the Jason Kilar, because I'm also like you've asked. I'm not too familiar with Warner, like I am Disney. But supposedly when this Jason Kilar started, he was on the Warner Brothers lot, giving people high fives, talking to people, real hands-on, rolling up his sleeves. And he ended up being pretty terrible. And it kind of, I was kind of thinking to myself, wow, you really don't know these guys. Like, you can think like a person, if I would have told you that, like, oh, the WarnerMedia guy is going to be hands-on, roll up his sleeves, giving everyone high fives in the studio, super passionate, you probably think, oh, wow, this guy's going to be great. Well, I mean, this guy wasn't, and he checked all those boxes, right? And he still sucked. You just never know. You never know until they get in there and they do their thing. It kind of, it's iffy.
Yeah, I think we've been experiencing that on the Lucasfilm front with some people, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that.
Definitely. Let's pivot now. We're gonna stay on this whole kind of movie topic thing. We're gonna talk about Shang-Chi and this new 45-day theatrical window that they announced. Now, this is down from the usual 90-day window. Vash, what are your thoughts on this move by Disney?
So we had been kind of theorizing, like, okay, when are these exclusive windows going to come back to theaters? Because man, they live and die by content releases and those windowing practices. When was that going to be reestablished? With what films, in what season, that kind of thing. And so to hear this news, this was a really, really big one. And a lot of people kind of slept on it because of some of the other news that was pointed out in that earnings call. But this was a huge one. This was a real big one. As we've been saying before, the theaters have been desperate to get films back into their theaters. They've been desperate to have these window practices restarted. And so to get an announcement like this, this was like I said, it was just big news. So Shang-Chi is going to be coming out September 3rd. I believe it's Freeman. Is that the other title?
Yeah, free guy or free man, something like that.
Yeah, the Ryan Reynolds film.
Ryan Reynolds, yeah. I'm a big fan of him, so I'll probably check that one out. I think he's great.
Right. So very interesting titles to be having this 45-day window thing, and to have it be in the fall. That's other very kind of big thing. It seems to be that they expect that consumer sentiment would be at high levels then.
Yeah, and I was actually very encouraged by Chapek's comment actually as to why they were doing this. And he said it's due to the fact that he's seeing, quote, increased confidence in moviegoing. Now, the reason why I like this comment from Chapek is because it shows that he's listening. It shows that he's taking the temperature of the room and kind of applying that temperature to the company's policy. I like that. I like that he's listening, because I do see that as well. I've made it very clear in a lot of my videos, I'm not a big movie theater guy. I'm just not. I get to the theater, people are talking, there's a kid kicking my seat, and it's just, for me, there's just a lot more distractions than it's worth. But I also understand that a lot of people, a majority of people, love the theater going experience and cherish it. And so for that, I want it to stick around, not for me, but just because I think that there is value. People like it, and the fact that Chapek is listening and saying, hey, there's increased confidence in movie going and we're not going to give up on it. I'm listening to the people, basically, gives me a lot of, that encourages me at least a little bit with Chapek. At least a little bit. Mr. Family Man, what are your thoughts on this new 45-day window? It's down about half from the 90-day window that it used to be. What are your thoughts on it?
I think it's more so just kind of keeping a safe bet on the situation. It's like supply and demand.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, Chapek, the way he responded to it was perfect because, again, I think that this situation was already going to be coming, in years to come. But I think with COVID and the shutdown and everything, it definitely pushed everything much, much sooner than what everyone was anticipating. So I think it's pretty much a safe bet that if you don't feel comfortable with going into the movie theaters, or if it's just not your cup of tea, then you don't have to wait a longer period of time for something to be released. And or if you do want that movie going experience, you still have what they title now a window that you can still experience it. So I think it's more sense of that movies aren't going to be dragged out for months and months at a time in the theater. It's like, let's get it out, let people have that experience, and then let's bring it on Blu-ray and DVD and the streaming platforms. Because I think nowadays it's, do we really need a movie to be in theaters for 6 months, and then wait like another 2 to 3 months for it to be released?
Yeah, times are changing. I agree with you completely, George. Times are changing, and I know there's a lot of pushback with this. You see a lot of pushback with any kind of change in regards to these release windows and what have you. But look, there was a lot of pushback too when studios were dropping hand-drawn animation, firing a lot of their traditional hand-drawn animators and what have you when they went from hand-drawn to CGI. And look, I prefer traditional animation. I was deeply saddened by that whole transition. But like, you just have to understand that technology and times evolve. I'm saddened to hear that a lot of Blockbuster employees lost their jobs during that whole thing. But again, technology moves on, and it's like, this is what happens. Same thing goes for this. The movie theaters are going to take a hit, but it's evolution. And it's just, I think that this is just the natural progression of things. And I think that, yeah, this 45-day window makes a lot of sense. It's a decent compromise. I think, it's not too crazy.
These films are so front loaded. 45 days, I think is fair. Like you said, the cultural shifts in terms of how people watch content, consume content has changed drastically. It's going to take some build up to get some to people back in the theaters, and I think that's why they went with these releases in this time frame. It's going to be kind of interesting to see how that is affected. He just Chapek just said that he's just looking at the box office releases even a couple of weeks ago, and they were down 80% from what a typical weekend or box office total would be at about that time. So it's going to be kind of interesting to see what the totals are and how this all plays out. I will say they really do want to establish franchises in the theaters and kind of get that theater buzz, get that theater hype, get those characters or franchises supplanted in that way. But like I said, times are changing, and in order to get any windowing at all, it's a big win for the theater owners.
Yeah, and it's like, I think that the days of everything going straight to theaters is over. I think we're going to see a lot of big tent poles, a lot of big visual spectacle movies in the theaters going forward. Obviously, Star Wars, Marvel, right, Avatar, the DC movies, King Kong, stuff like that will be in theaters because it lends itself to the big screen experience. Yeah. But the other stuff, romantic comedies, there's no reason why you would have to see a romantic comedy on the big screen. It's not a visual spectacle that you can get just as much value out of a romantic comedy on your iPad, or on your own TV at home or whatever. I think the days of having those smaller kind of films, like I said, the comedies, romantic comedies, maybe the dramas, things like that, those will probably be, the studios will probably opt to put those directly onto their streaming service platforms, and then their big tent poles will be in theaters. I just think that the days of those, everything goes to theaters, I think that those days are long gone.
At the Harkins near me, the Harkins Theaters are a local chain here. They kind of undertook a kind of refurbishment during the pandemic period to kind of get their theaters up, up to modern standards. And it's interesting because now they have less theaters than they did before. So I think or screens than they did before. So I think what we'll see is these multiplexes that were born out of all these studios producing all these films. I think you're right. I think the big temples will go to them, and the smaller films will not. Just doesn't mandate that kind of distribution practice probably anymore. And so I think you'll see a consolidation, a lessening of screens, but the quality of said experience in those screens will be improved probably. So you'll probably have bigger auditoriums, advanced sound systems, advanced lighting, and so forth.
Mr. Family Man, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you feel in terms of like, the theater experience and its future, its place in this whole industry going forward?
Well, you definitely can take a note of it that even Disney has done it itself with their streaming platform with Disney Plus, such as the films of Artemis Fowl and Flora and Ulysses. Yep. Those films, more so would have been released in theaters, but given to what the films are, great films, especially Flora and Ulysses. I did watch that movie. It's a very good movie, but to actually say, let's actually take the time and, have more cost cutting to put it in theaters of really how many people would go see a movie like that in theaters. It's, compared to, another Avengers movie or another Star Wars movie. You can definitely pick and choose which ones would be the ones that would make a profit in theaters. So I think that would be more so for all companies, moving forward, that I think that they'll pretty much just kind of weigh in on which films would really do well at the box office. Now, when it comes to like comedy films, that can go either way, because the Hangover films, they brought in, millions upon millions of dollars. You have these certain, but who is ever really to say if it would have? They could have released The Hangover and it could have been a complete flop. So I think when it comes time for those kind of movies, I really don't think that film studios are going to take that risk anymore. I think it's more so what the audience is already familiar with, as far as like with Marvel, Star Wars, DC, Pixar, and even the classic Disney animation.
Yeah. It's times are changing. It's pretty crazy to see all this stuff. Like, even just from a few years ago, like I am super convinced that if the situation was as it is now, and they were considering doing the Solo Star Wars movie now, like let's say that was in development as of right now, 2021, that would have been a TV show. That they wouldn't have put that in theaters, in my opinion. I think that would have been a TV show for sure. The way that the studio has changed their mindset and their approach to things has drastically changed so fast that even 2018 seems like a dinosaur.
Can you imagine if Disney Plus was not already set up by the time all this happened? Can you imagine like them just starting the process of it now? That would have been a disaster and a half.
Oh my God, they missed that by sheer months before. I'm still amazed by that. Great point, George.
And that's kind of goes back to our last segment where we were saying how Comcast needs to get on the ball, because you're right. There are these windows of opportunity that you have to jump on and take advantage of, and they're missing the boat there.
Yep, absolutely.
You got to cement your place in this streaming battle, and you got to do it soon. You can't wait forever.
You do, and that's why they're doing it. I mean, this is the way it was going, folks. Bob Iger, now it's like 12, 13 years ago, had an idea. Hey, can we release all of our films at once at the same time, on the same day? So this was kind of inevitable. This was kind of the way the industry was going. Pandemic, unfortunately, was the great accelerator and all that, but it's the devices change, the distribution platforms change, how we consume content changes, and this is only the next logical step in this chain. I'm just glad that theaters were able to get just a little win. We'll see if it works out. Yeah,
and like I said, I wish the theaters well. I am not personally a big theater person, but I do understand that market, and people have a love for the theater experience, and it's cultural too. People go on dates and do the movie thing, and like it's a big deal for our society. It should live on, at least to some degree. It might not be as big as it was 20 years ago, but I think it should still remain an option for people that want to do it.
I think that's where it's going to go, is how it was for drive-ins. The movie theater took over the drive-in experience, even though it's still there. But I mean, it's very complacent to what it used to be. And I think now with streaming services, that's the movie theater is going to be the new drive-in, sort of.
Right. Yeah. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So let's pivot now to our next topic, which is going to be Dave Filoni, Lucasfilm. Big news. Big news.
Big news, but not surprising.
Yes, big news, not surprising, but also kind of surprising at the same time in a weird way. And I'll get into that in a second. But it was officially confirmed via the Lucasfilm website that he is the executive creative producer of Lucasfilm. So that's a promotion for Mr. Filoni, and you know what? Deservedly so. The guy is brilliant. He's loved universally by Star Wars fans. But Vash Scott, what are your thoughts on this promotion for Mr. Dave Filoni? How are you feeling right now?
Kind of feeling like this, actually.
This is our most desperate hour. Help me,
Dave Filoni.
You're my only hope.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it, guys.
There you go.
So
drop the mic.
Drop the mic, right? Listen, Lucasfilm has kind of had a rocky history when it comes to not only just creatives, but the projects that were on the slate got dropped and so forth. They've had an issue when it comes to content production, content creation, mapping out, where to go with all of these things. So to bring a stable kind of fan favorite voice like Dave Filoni who knows, he knows the Star Wars universe, he knows the characters, knows what it means, knows what the themes are. I think it's a really, really great thing that he has been elevated in this position. He's attached to so many different projects right now that I think it was necessary to bump him up into this position. What was really interesting, though, was that I guess Variety got the scoop that they had actually elevated his position, like last summer or something like that, and then
Yes.
didn't actually post about it, which is very, very, very interesting. But George, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I mean, it was like one of those things where when I heard this, it was like, as Orange Grove said, there is some surprise to it, but it was like, it was well deserved. Like, this is something, I mean, he took.
Oh.
It looks like the Empire shut down his feed.
Oh no! Oh, I should have had that. Wait. Hang on. Maybe I do. No, I don't. But look, I think to expand upon the points here. I think what's really interesting here, like we alluded to. Oh, George, you're back.
There he is.
Go ahead.
He's back. What were you saying, George? The Empire took down your feed.
Yeah. See, that's what happened. See, the Emperor was listening. But no, it was more so like of a rocky continuation from the original trilogy, and then it's just like everyone has this expectation of it has to be just as good as the original. And I think once Filoni got intermixed with Favreau and everything, and they have like this working progress that they're really bringing Star Wars to its own, where it's not repeating itself, and it's like it's creating their own individual stories. And it's like with what's been coming up for Star Wars with The Mandalorian and then the upcoming the Book of Boba Fett and everything, so much to look forward to. I think this was the right call.
Well, yeah, absolutely, George. Absolutely. And Dave Filoni, actually, in my opinion, is a credit. I think it's a lot of his work is the reason why I think people love, or at least like, the prequels now and love the character of Anakin Skywalker, because the Clone Wars, which Filoni was running, really, really improved upon the prequels. He kind of put some meat on those bones, so to speak. And it's because of him and his storytelling with that show that has really elevated the prequels. Because those prequels, when they came out, they were not beloved at all. And it wasn't until like Filoni came in and did Clone Wars and really expanded on that whole Anakin storyline that people really started to fall in love with that era. The guy is really brilliant. I don't love everything the guy does. The space whales were kind of weird in Rebels. you know.
I will
But
agree with that.
but it's still like filling in like with the meat and potatoes, like
Right.
because we had these characters in these prequels, and it's like they were kind of stale, to say like what is the backstory, like how did they get to this point? And it wasn't until Clone Wars and Rebels, it was like it's filling in the pages, so to speak, that George Lucas left out from the prequels.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Filoni did a brilliant job at doing that, and I would love him to tackle the sequels. I know a lot of people aren't huge fans of the sequel trilogy, and why not have Filoni to tackle that era and kind of do the same thing he did with the prequels, where he can fill in the gaps and kind of add some context. It could work. What do you think, Vash, on this whole situation?
It's kind of interesting because the prequels were very much a galactic story. It was like a really, really big story, and it really probably needed to be more personal. And Filoni did that exceptionally well with the Clone Wars, made it a more personal story, and really followed the trajectory of the characters much more closely, while still playing in that huge, sandbox that George Lucas developed. I think it's interesting because if you look at the sequel trilogy, it probably could have been expanded out a little bit more and included more stories, more of the more stories of the factions of their own histories, how they were established and so forth, and what the state of the galaxy was during all that period of time. So I agree with you. I think you could actually do kind of a treatment to the sequel trilogy and really kind of expand that out with kind of magical Filoni storytelling. He's kind of dipped his toe in it before. He was executive producer for Star Wars Resistance. So, I mean, I don't think he's adverse to doing that, but it's elevating him to this position maybe gives him the freedom to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. Now the timing, and this is the thing that I was talking to Family Man at the beginning about what was surprising to me, and the timing was surprising in the announcement. And Vash, you touched upon this as well, where it was updated on the website recently, but he's had the position since last summer. It's been almost a full year now that he's been the executive creative director.
Mm-hmm.
That's weird to me on a couple of things, for a couple of reasons. Number one is because like he is a fan favorite. Like there's literally zero risk. There's all benefit to announcing that right away. I don't know why Lucasfilm sat on that. That was really a weird, bizarre decision. But the other thing that makes me kind of think and kind of scratch my chin a little bit is last summer, I wonder who signed off on that. Because look, obviously Kathleen Kennedy had to approve it because she's running Lucasfilm. Totally, I get that.
Yeah.
But what about higher up? I'm sure the CEO would have to as well, right? I mean, that's a big decision and one of their biggest franchises. Was it Bob Iger who signed off on that, or was it Bob Chapek? Because I know that Iger was kind of doing the creative stuff for a while for Chapek during the pandemic. I don't know, but if
they actually give the date when he was filled with that position,
I don't have a date. They just said last summer. Do you have a date, Vash?
Nope, no date. They just said it was quietly done, and they had just recently updated the executive, kind of website listing of it. So we really don't know the timeline or what specific circumstances, mandating this kind of move here. I mean, we assume that he has so many products, in the pipeline. I mean, there's so many Disney Plus projects and maybe a couple of films that he is involved in that necessitated moving him up, but it's just really interesting how that never came to light.
I wonder if it's because during the time we still really weren't sure where everything was going as far as like with COVID and everything, and how much was going to be released and produced and how much was going to be able to be filmed and created and what have you. So I wonder if they gave him the job but never really knew what direction it was going to go, and then once everything started opening back up, it's like, you know what, now's the best time to officially announce this.
Maybe
that's my only guess.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I mean, there's been some rumblings of disagreements within Lucasfilm, and people are going to speculate whether or not that had anything to do with it because of such of the circumstances of this specific move up the chain here. But he's in that role now. So under what circumstances that was done, not sure. It's going to be really interesting to see and follow his trajectory, and see where it goes here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this move, I think, is definitely a positive. It's a boon for Star Wars fans. It's a boon for Lucasfilm. I'm happy to see it. I love Dave Filoni, man. Like, I love Dave. Like, I think he's gonna do a great job. I would love to see. I don't think he should run Lucasfilm because I think he is more of a creative type. I think you do need to have that more of a business Hollywood kind of awareness. I don't think I think he is more of a creative guy. He's kind of like a, like a Pete Docter, so to speak, where he's purely creative. There's not really financial bone in his body. But I would love to see, like, a Filoni Favreau, like, kind of duo running the studio eventually, because I think
Very much
that's what I hope eventually becomes, because I think they're the two that will take both sides of the platform and literally fuse it together, as far as like with Filoni, with how he does with Clone Wars and Rebels and what have you, and then Favreau with The Mandalorian and everything. So, I mean, it meshes well. And even with bringing up The Mandalorian, it also brought on some of the characters from the television show. So it broadens the horizon when they do these live action series or movies, that they could now continue from where the show left off.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. In our last couple of topics, we talked about the Discovery deal and the head of Discovery, and there was a quote out there saying that he was going to move to Hollywood and establish relationships with creators. It's interesting because, if you were to have a dual relationship with Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau has all those relationships in Hollywood. He has all those relationships with talent. I think he is a little bit more business oriented than Dave Filoni would be. And I think between them, they could have great, not only production insight, but creative insight, and really a direction for this thing to go, and be creatively focused in that way. So I would favor something like that. And from what I understand, from what the kind of, rumor mill is bubbling up, that might be happening. We'll see, though. I take that with a grain of salt. I know I do. But that would be the preferable route going forward for Star Wars as a whole.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that The Mandalorian has completely elevated both of these men, Filoni and Favreau. I mean, really, outside of The Force Awakens, which was a juggernaut, no doubt. But outside of that film, The Mandalorian was the most successful thing that Disney has ever done with Star Wars. I mean, it was huge. Yeah. I mean, absolutely huge. And there's no ignoring that. Now, I am curious about who was calling the shots last summer, whether it was Iger or Chapek in regards to this, because it would encourage me a great deal if Chapek was the one who signed off on it, because I want to believe that he would have that kind of.
I want to believe it, but I don't know why.
I don't know. It's interesting because usually the studios manage themselves. They're really, there's not that many times when, the CEO or the president or so forth will go and make a move like that. Usually it's within the studios themselves that make moves like that. From the Variety article, it sounded like Kathleen Kennedy actually made
I was just going to say,
which is really interesting.
Would Kathleen Kennedy really have done that? Like, based on her sort of record?
I mean, maybe. I mean, you could speculate. I know, like, my thoughts on it is maybe it was to elevate Dave Filoni and almost a pact or agreement in how things were going to go moving forward. I'm not sure, though. This is particularly interesting. Apparently, when the information went live on the website like completely got overrun, shut down because of the amount of traffic, because of how excited people were. So this is a big thing here.
Wow. This is huge. This is what fans have been waiting for a long time. They want Filoni to have a bigger role at Lucasfilm. Mm-hmm. Everybody. I mean, and again, like, there are things that Filoni has done that I don't absolutely love, but it's not about loving everything that he does. The man understands Star Wars, and overall, he knows what to do with it, and he's been successful in it. And, he deserves a bigger role in that whole creative process for the studio. He's proven himself. He's done a lot of great work for that studio.
Far more hits than misses.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very interesting. We'll see. And I do want to extend a huge congratulations to Mr. Filoni. I am encouraged now a little bit more in regards to the future of Star Wars, with him kind of having more power. It's going to be an interesting ride going forward. We'll see.
In the fedora, we trust.
Yes. Our space cowboy.
Yep, there it is. There it is. There it is. Oh, boy.
So moving on to our last and final topic, He-Man is getting a new show, and this is a sequel. That's important. It's a sequel, not a reboot. So it's actually it's kind of picking up where the old show from the early 80s ended. It's going to be I think the showrunner is Kevin Smith.
Yes.
Kevin Smith. And Vash, I mean, what are your thoughts on this new He-Man? I mean, there were some new images released, and being a sequel, not a reboot. What are your overall thoughts, man?
He-Man, master of the universe. This guy?
By the power of Grayskull.
That guy?
Guy.
Okay. So that's this is kind of cool. Listen, we talked about Flintstones, and we talked about the failures and stuff with that, and how we weren't super excited about who was leading that project. And you heard the I forget her name, but the director of Pitch Perfect 2. You heard her talk about it, and she was just like, well, it kind of sounded like it was trying to like do Flintstones into something, like make it or change it in a way to make it something that she would watch herself. So that's why we kind of had those thoughts on it that we did. This sounds far more interesting. Kevin Smith apparently is a fan of it, and if you look at this cast, and I have the photo right here to bring it up here.
There you go.
This cast is, I'll try to make it bigger. This cast is huge. I mean, it's got talent from all over Hollywood, and it's really fascinating to see. It was up there. Okay, it's really fascinating to see who is on board with this. You got Mark Hamill, for instance. You got some of the Game of Thrones cast. You got people all over the industry joining into this kind of almost collaborative effort. This is real. This is a lot more fascinating to me than like the Flintstones, for example.
Absolutely, 1,000% more interesting. And here's the thing. here's something interesting about myself a little bit. I've always been a big Disney fan, but my obsession with Disney didn't really begin until maybe like the early 90s, when that whole Renaissance era started. When I was a very, very young child, I would say under 12, under 11, I was more into stuff like this. I was obsessed with He-Man, Transformers, even Care Bears. I liked My Little Pony, Thundercats, Silverhawks. Those were my jams, you know what I'm saying? And I was more into this stuff than I was Disney when I was a really young child. So He-Man hits to me directly, and it hits me in the feels, because it's totally nostalgic for my childhood, my very, very young youth. I'm excited. I love the direction he's going with this, where it being a sequel, not a reboot, which is, I think, important. I think that's pretty cool. And I think Kevin Smith, being a nerd himself, who is of this generation that would have grown up on He-Man, I think he's going to do well for the character and the franchise. I think he's going to respect it and do good by it. I really do. George, I know you're a 90s baby. This is a little after your time, but what do you feel about He-Man coming back, buddy?
This was definitely after my time, but I did watch the show, throughout the 90s, so I do have some appreciation for it. Based on what you're showing me, like with the cast, I mean, these aren't just secondhand people that you get from a Playhouse theater. I mean, like, these are seasoned professionals that they're literally combining. So I guess in my mind that they have this big anticipation that this is going to be a colossal hit. And I really think if it's done well, I think it can honestly start something up where, sort of how like with Marvel and DC and Star Wars, that He-Man could start, creating its own universe, and branch off into different things.
Yeah, absolutely. These kind of like, in reimagining or bringing these old franchises back, they either work or they don't. I mean, hey, Transformers, as bad as some of those movies are, hey, they were successful. Those movies, a lot of those movies made over $1 billion. They did a very good job at kind of bringing that franchise to the new age, the new generation. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work so well. This might catch fire. This might do very, very well. And I'm very much encouraged by the cast and by who's running it, Kevin Smith. I think it has potential, at least. At the very least, it has potential.
Yeah. I mean, there have been iterations of He-Man and most recently, I think, She-Ra over the years. I don't think any of them have been particularly as successful as the 1980s original series, but there's certainly an audience. I mean, the original series was just, man, it was a massive juggernaut from what I understand back in the 80s. I'm kind of with George. I'm a little after my time, but I remember hearing it, on the school kids' playground, even in the 90s. So it did have a huge impact on pop culture, and I think it's really kind of a fascinating thing. I mean, you have some really heavy hitters, throwing their hat in the ring and contributing to this project to give it some validity. I guess Kevin Smith called in all the favors for this one. It's really, really interesting. But Kevin Smith, like you said, he's a fan. He knows the material, knows the lore, almost like, somebody else we just got done talking about. But look, it's coming out of a passionate place, and we'll see if it strikes that balance between what worked before and what works now. But this is I'm excited for this one. I really am.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I had all the toys. You guys ever see the old '80s He-Man toys?
I actually used to own them. So,
weren't they great?
Yeah, I had a little local store. It was called Groovies, and they sold nostalgic type of 70s and 80s toys. Like they sold the He-Man, they sold Thundercats, SWAT Cats. Like they sold all those. I forget some of the others, but yeah, they sold all kinds of toys, and I was always one that I always leaned more towards the villains, not because of what the villains stood for. I just thought that they were more cool looking, So like anything that I saw that was like completely out there, it's like I had to have it.
Yeah, the toys were amazing. My grandma, man, my grandma was like, she was kind of a nerd herself. like she bought me all of anytime she went to the store and saw a new one, she'd just buy it for me. I had a whole closet full of these, dude. I mean, it was great. I absolutely loved it. Did you ever collect the toys, Vash?
No, I didn't collect the toys. I was all into the Star Wars action figures myself personally. So nice. I never made it over to He-Man. But I mean, look, I had friends who had toys. I had friends who had who watched the show. Cartoon Network and the Tsunami specials and stuff like that. They would play He-Man and stuff like that. So I remember it. I remember growing up with it. I wasn't super into the show, but there's definitely appeal there. There's no question. This is a really cool thing. It's got a complex kind of lore and world, and it's really kind of a unique kind of programmed show, and it's just I think this could do well in the new era of entertainment, as long as it's done passionately, with heart, with soul. Kevin Smith, I think, is the right guy.
Yeah, and do you know, Vash, do you know who owns He-Man now? Like, because I think it was Filmation back in the day, but obviously I don't think Filmation's even around anymore. I haven't heard of them in years.
No.
Did Netflix buy He-Man, or is it owned by some other studio?
I believe, because I believe the She-Ra show that came out, I think in like 2018 or something like that. I think that premiered on Netflix as well. So that leads me to believe that Netflix might have the distribution rights when it comes to TV entertainment and so forth. So I think that's with them. But let me just look in here and see if I can actually find that.
Yeah, I'm just very curious what studio owns that now, because I'm sure it's passed hands since the 80s, because I don't believe Filmation's even around anymore.
No, I don't think so either. It is a Hasbro property, And
Oh,
Hasbro historically has done work with all kinds of people, but I don't know who actually owns the rights to it. This is very interesting.
Yeah.
I think it is. I think it is Netflix, though. I think Netflix has it, from what I understand. So I would just say it's with them. Look, I think if it's successful, Netflix has shelled out big money for stuff like, oh, I don't know, what was that? What was that big franchise? It was the video game franchise. The Witcher.
Oh,
Remember,
okay.
it had like a little series with Henry Cavill and stuff like that.
Right.
For the Witcher franchise. I mean, if this is big enough, good enough, you could see like a theatrical type release at one point, even if it's done in animation. Netflix is doing all kinds of stuff, rewriting the game when it comes to content production, distribution, and so forth. So I don't know, we'll see. But this is quite fascinating.
Netflix is thirsty. They spend billions on content. They're crazy. They don't spare any expense. They just like you want, like we talked about, like, you know, like Discovery, WarnerMedia, Comcast earlier on in this whole video. But like, man, the opposite of Comcast is Netflix. They have all the ambition in the world, and they'll spend every dime to get there. You know, they don't care. We'll bankrupt the company. Just spend it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's those guys are, man, those guys just, yeah, like you said, money out of the money fire hose. They'll just pour it on to whatever they really believe in and trust, and they'll sink it. It is quite fascinating. You know, but if you want that $200 million, 200 million subscriber number, this is stuff you kind of have to do.
Right. Exactly. See, now, George, now we got to wait for, because now the 90s stuff. Hopefully, we get some reboots and sequels from the 90s stuff that you grew up on. You know. And,
yeah, like I'm waiting like for like that slew full of like take me back to my childhood. Like I want to see, because I mean I started seeing it like with, I mean, even though it started in the late 80s, but it moved into the 90s, but like how they did with DuckTales,
right,
and how they kind of incorporated in a few episodes of Darkwing Duck and everything. Like I would love to see more of that stuff come back to life, because a lot of those things you mentioned of Darkwing Duck and Tailspin and everything, and kids are like, what's that? You know, like
right.
they've never even heard of that stuff unless you actually put it on Disney Plus, and it's
Right.
like, oh, that's what it is. That's why I started my son off very early, because I used to have the box sets, and I said, you're watching Darkwing Duck, you're watching DuckTales, you're watching Tailspin, you're watching Goof Troops. You know, you're watching this, so you get to know what it is.
See, parents at home, that's how you do it.
That's it.
That's it. Good parenting 101.
That is it. Oh man. Yeah. Hopefully we do get some stuff like that.
I mean, I will definitely say, I mean, I know that this is a sequel. This isn't a reboot, but I'm telling you right now, you know, Rocky and Muggsy, the gangsters from the Looney Tunes that kidnapped Bugs Bunny. I swear, if Martin Scorsese moves on to make his version of it, I'm gone. I'm done.
Oh,
It's coming, folks.
No. Yeah, I'm sure. That's gonna go off. Real well. I'm confident in that. No, I mean, hopefully we get some more ideas like this. You know, I know some people are like, oh, reboots and stuff like that, but I think if you do it really well,
Yeah,
I think it could be, you know, you could make something out of it. So it'll be interesting to see.
You know, and here's the interesting thing about like Walt Disney. It kind of plays to the brilliance of Walt Disney, and I'll tell you guys why. Like Walt Disney kind of understood that you had to kind of evolve your characters and keep them relevant as you go. You can't, you know, a lot of these companies, you know, like we talked about Bedrock with the Flintstones, they try to do something 30 years after the fact, right? And by that time, it's kind of, sometimes it's too late. You're trying to rekindle something that may or may not work. Where Walt Disney said, hey, you know what? I'm going to evolve Mickey Mouse. I'm going to, you know, with Fantasia, they changed the way his face looked, right? And he was relevant. He kept using Mickey Mouse through the years. So he never became a Felix the Cat, or he never became a Flintstones where you had to reboot 30 years later.
Well, and he started out that way. Like Mickey was more mischievous. He was more, you know, to his surroundings, sort of like a wise guy, a pest. But as you said, as he moves on, he then dawns on like the suit and tie. He becomes like a master of ceremony type of mouse, you know? So it's like in that transition, it's like, okay, you get this real charismatic, carefree, kind of a pessimistic mouse, and then you move him onto this sort of like where you kind of have a beloved character that everyone can enjoy. But then it goes back to the roots with the new Mickey Mouse shorts. You know, it
Right.
shows how he started off with, you know, that personality where it's like, you know, I could be a little bit of a wisecrack still, you know, after 80 plus years, you know, I still got it.
Yeah, I mean that was the brilliant Walt. Even back then, he knew you had to keep your character in the limelight for it to stay relevant. And a lot of these other companies never, even after all that, they never got it. They would let these characters go dormant for decades and try to bring them back after the fact. And sometimes it works, but a lot of times it doesn't. You know?
Yeah, I mean, you try to do something with a built-in audience or something that worked in previous generations or in previous years, and sometimes it's just no longer relevant, and they don't get that balance of staying true to the source material and giving something that fans will enjoy, but also newcomers will enjoy. That balance is really hard to strike, and like you said, a lot of times they strike out. But I think you bring up a good point. I mean, the Disney company has done a fairly decent job of keeping a lot of the characters relevant, a lot of the stories relevant, a lot of their franchises relevant. And so, you know, that's just, like I said, it's the brilliance of Walt Disney. And hopefully we can see a little taste of that with He-Man.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even like if you look at something like Beauty and the Beast, right? They came out like in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
Like that movie came out like a long time ago, right? Then they tried to do the live action movie, you know, in what I think it was like 2017, and the movie made over $1 billion. Now the movie made over $1 billion not because, you know, I mean, in my opinion, it wasn't because this particular film looks so amazing. I think it's because of kudos to Disney, because they were able to keep that film relevant all those years, where by the time they redid it, people were still interested in the franchise. It wasn't a dead franchise they were trying to rekindle. It never left. I mean, Little Mermaid, people are still talking about that movie.
And I think it's how Disney approaches the platform. It's not just on a one level base of just keeping it on the screen. Like it went from the film to Broadway.
Right.
You know, and that's how they kept it relevant for how many years that it was on Broadway. And then, you know, many years later, you know, you have the characters in the parks, you have the live stage show at Hollywood Studios, you know, you have the new attraction that's at Tokyo, you know, so it's like, and then with the film and everything, to make, to your point, Orange Grove, with the live action, it's like they kept it so relevant, so fresh, that they allowed the audience to not forget about those characters, to not forget about the story.
Yeah.
I mean, Little Mermaid came out in 1989, and I think the attraction in DCA premiered, what, 2010, 2011?
Yeah.
That's some staying power right there. You know, it just shows you how relevant they can keep these franchises sometimes. You know, it's interesting because, you know, we talk about Mickey Mouse, and Mickey Mouse is like this character that knows no boundaries almost. You can go into any country and you can kind of point to a Mickey Mouse doll, and they kind of know what it is, you know, even though their preconceptions of it are completely different than our own. It's really, really, it's really kind of an awesome thing that the Disney company has done over the years.
Yeah, yeah. And it's kind of interesting too how, like, within the context of Disney, you know, like how they lost Oswald all those years, and I think they bought the rights back to Oswald like in 2006. And even when you look at an example like that, I love Oswald. I will buy all the Oswald merchandise. I love that character. But I mean, fact is, he's not Goofy or Donald or the other characters that they were able to kind of nurture through the years and kind of keep relevant. And it kind of shows he's not the same because he didn't get that same, you know, the evolution like the other ones did. And he is more irrelevant, sadly, because I love the character, but he's more irrelevant. He's Disney's Felix the Cat. You know, I mean,
a little bit. It's kind of interesting. You know, the story of how they got that back.
They traded some like sports guy for him, right?
Al Michaels, they traded Al Michaels for him. So it's kind of interesting going up to him, and you know, this kind of historic broadcaster, you know, sports commentator. You go to him and say, "Okay, you're being traded to Comcast Universal." Oh, okay. For what? What was the big what was the big money or a big pot of gold that you shifted over? Like 100-year-old character that hasn't been relevant in like 80 years. That's who we got. It's just kind of bizarre and fascinating, but give it up to Iger. He made the deal.
Yeah. That was the first thing that Iger did. That I
Yep.
was like, you know what, this guy's got chops. I started a lot from that point on. I started to pay attention to him. I'm like, okay.
He knew the history. He knew he knew the history of the character. Knew who had it. Kudos to him. Sorry, Al Michaels.
Well, and it was a kind of an olive branch. I think he kind of realized too, like, okay, I'm the new CEO. Obviously, I'm gonna have to earn my clout. I'm gonna earn my respect from the diehards. And I think that was kind of like his way of kind of like, all right, here you go, guys. This is for you. Early on, he did it, you know, and I think that made a difference. And then he bought Pixar, and then that further cemented his, and he understood that he had to kind of earn his respect from the fans, and he did it early on, and that was smart.
Yeah. Speaking of relevance and Iger's kind of legacy there, it was I think he was in China, in Hong Kong, looking at the one of the parades that they had just premiered, and he saw the people's reaction to the classic Disney characters, and saw the enormous reaction to the Pixar stuff, and that's what led him to buy Pixar and do that because of just how relevant they actually were. And it speaks to our point about relevance and keeping these characters relevant and so forth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I heard that story too, where like he was like. The crowd was super interested in the Pixar stuff, and there was really nothing that Disney offered in that parade that anyone really cared about. And it was kind of like an epiphany moment where he was like, wow, how far has Disney animation fallen where all the Pixar characters are the ones that people care about, and I don't see anything from Disney up here.
Yep.
And then the second that their agreement would have been broken, they would have lost those characters. So he was not, he knew what he was doing as far as, what, I better talk to Lasseter, I better talk to Steve Jobs fairly quickly.
Yeah, no, absolutely, George. And like it really is that whole situation with Pixar really kind of proves that it is sometimes better to buy the cow than to rent it. And you can license things out and you can do that whole thing, but like
forget the milk, I want the beef.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He knew he needed an infusion of creative talent to really kind of spread around the Disney company, and it was a really great, it was a great purchase from that front, because you can license stuff out, but if you really want that creative gold mine that was Pixar and infuse it to the rest of the company, you can only do that by acquisition. And I think that was a really savvy move by him, and we saw the fruits of that over the entire, Iger era, and it was quite interesting. Also making the move because, well, every single time that the Disney parks kind of screwed up, they always went to the Pixar well, and so there was so much Pixar in the actual parks, they had no choice but to buy at that point, because if they pulled out,
Yeah, that's true. I remember early 2000s, everything coming to the parks was Pixar. And then there was sort of like almost like, I think, a little bit of a bitterness from Lasseter as the time went on, and Pixar took a little more of a back seat because we had Star Wars and Marvel and everything else, where when they removed Bugs Land, there was a little bit of sourness there, and he demanded like Pixar appear, and I won't get too far into that, but like, yeah, it kind of led into the later years where it kind of made an issue, but it was interesting. It was very, very interesting.
Fascinating. Maybe a topic for another time.
Definitely. Yeah. But thank you guys for coming on. I do appreciate it. We'll start with you, Mr. Family Man. Where can, if you can remind everyone at home where they can, find you on social media.
Absolutely. You can find me on my YouTube channel at Disney Family Man 23. You can find me on Twitter at Disney George. And you could also find me on the I'll see if I can, there we go. The podcast on iTunes and Stitcher.
Perfect. Vash Sky, where can the good people at home find you, sir?
Best place to find me or interact with me on social media is at Vash Sky on Twitter. Best place to reach out. Always up for a conversation. Had some great debates. And as far as content here on YouTube, I'm on your channel, Orange Grove. Freshly Squeezed, your source for juicy new info. Free squeezed, fresh right from the Grove. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you, fellas, for coming on. Comment below. What do you think about the He-Man show? Relevant franchises, Dave Filoni, the Discovery Warner Media thing. Comment below. We'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you all so much for watching. And as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day. Bye-bye, y'all.